Hey everybody, gonna do a quick review on changing this oil filter. So I'm gonna actually change this. If you did this in lab already, you don't have to submit anything as long as you've already submitted your lab sheet. If you missed lab and you missed out on the oil stuff, what you can do is I'll have a couple questions that you can answer and you can submit it on Blackboard. So if you were in lab and you've already done this, just submit your normal lab sheet. If you missed out, watch the video, answer the questions, and submit it that way. So what we're gonna do is change this oil filter out. So this is an oil burner, old school Beckett oil furnace. There it is. And we're gonna go through this a little bit, the process. It's a different process, but the first thing we're gonna do is change out this oil filter. Looks like that. I have the valve closed. I'm gonna use a 5/8 wrench. You can see that. I'm gonna just loosen it up a little bit. So a little oil is gonna come out. You can see. And so we're just gonna let it drain into our bucket. I'll continue to loosen that. So I'm going to support this canister while I unscrew this. If you unscrew it, eventually it'll come apart, and then it would flop onto the ground. You don't want that. I'm just going to dump that out. And typically there's going to be some sludge or some grit and grime in the bottom of here, and you would want to wipe that out with a rag. These were just changed yesterday, so there shouldn't be any dirt and grime. This is a wool filter, and the little screen would stick up. That goes in there like that. And I'm going to always replace the gasket. It's okay to take a little oil and put it on there and make it easier to come off, help seal it. Put that on there. The old gasket came off already. So this also comes with a new gasket that goes on top. Like that. And I'm going to use my 5/16. Take this off. And that also gets a new gasket. So it's good to have it to replace all three gaskets. Once a gasket's been used, it's been crushed, it's got reduced sealing capacity. So I always like to change them all, and that eliminates a lot of headaches and a lot of callbacks and a lot of drips and oil slicks. So I'm going to put that on there. Tighten that by hand. Once it gets fairly tight, I'll use my wrench. Okay, so while this is drained, because we drained the oil out of these lines, and so while this is already drained, what I would typically do is the pump itself, there's 4 screws, and I would take those 4 screws off, and there's a strainer inside of here, and I'll change out that strainer. So I'm going to use another pump and show you what that looks like. So I'll use the Allen wrench. I'm going to use the Allen wrench to take these Allen 4 screws out. I'm using the gloves because this oil, it's like diesel fuel, and it'll seep into your skin, and it's really hard to clean off, and it smells really bad. So it's got a very pungent odor. So if you weren't here in lab yesterday, you missed out on that part of it. So I wear these gloves to help protect. I'm also wearing protective clothing. Oops. So that comes off like that. Happens to be some oil in it. This is the strainer. So we changed the filter already. Now we're going to change a strainer. Comes in this little box. Looks like this, just like the old one. And this is our oil pump. So our oil pump, there's a gear inside of here, and it grabs the oil, and through that gear process, it squeezes it into a small passage, and it discharges up into our nozzle up there, which I'll show you what that looks like in a few minutes. Gasket should go on first. Now this. And so that would strain any material that might make it past that other filter that we had just changed out. So now I'm going to change this. So while we're looking at this, this is the model number of the pump. And there's actually a worksheet that you should be doing. A2VA-3006, made by Suntech. Different manufacturers have different ratings. And even the same manufacturer, different motor speeds. That's it. And this is not a bench, just so it's easier to see and work on. Normally in the insurance, so I'm just going to snug them down a little bit. Try to snug them sort of even. That way you get a nice even seal. So I'm going to just kind of go around, tighten them up, kind of in a cross pattern. And once they feel, I'm just going until there's some resistance, and then I'll switch ends of my Allen wrench, and I'm just going to give it a little bit of a, like that much. And I'll go down here, and I'm just going to go like that much, till there's good resistance. You don't have to break things. There. It kind of stops. I'm just using one finger. I'm giving it a little pressure. Okay, so that's it. Strainer. Done. Take the old stuff and throw it away. So now if you look inside of here, this is a transformer. It provides a 10,000 volts. Those springs provide voltage to these electrodes that are in here. And I'll show you what that looks like outside of the unit. So these electrodes would normally be inside of here. See what I'm saying? And I take them out. So this is the oil line. And oil comes up through, and this is our oil nozzle. And that's where the oil sprays out in a fine mist. Fuel oil is hard to ignite, so we atomize it through this nozzle. Atomization means that it's being broken down into almost a vapor form. Little teeny tiny droplets. So I'm going to use my 3/8 wrench. Oops. I'm going to loosen this just enough. Move those up out of the way, and I'm going to give it a little tight. I'll use this oil nozzle wrench. And that'll loosen this. And so this is my oil nozzle. And we're taking 100 pounds per square inch of fuel oil pressure, and we're running it through this screen, and then it goes through a whole bunch of passages, and then it comes out that little itty bitty hole there. So it doesn't take much to plug one of these up. All this should be done on like an annual basis minimum. If you're on a service call, furnace isn't working right, these are the things you should always replace. Looks just like this. So I'll get a new one. When you look at it, you always want to replace it with the same type of nozzle. The 0.65, that's 0.65 gallons per hour. 80 degrees is the spray angle of that mist that's coming out of oil. And then the A is the pattern. So it could be a hollow pattern, it could be a semi-hollow pattern, or it could be a solid pattern. I'm going to screw that in by hand. So I'll get it in there, and then I'm going to do my final tightening with this oil nozzle wrench. And all I'm going to do is, like, okay, I feel it kind of bottom out, and then I'm just going to give it a little bit of a till it stops. I'm just going to send it home. You don't have to use all your force. It's just go till you'll feel it bottom out, and then you just give it a little bit of a snug, and it's it. It's there. It's home. So now this has a precise setting. These electrodes, you want them just ahead of the nozzle, but just behind the spray of fuel oil. And so I'll show you how to set that. This is called a Z gauge. I don't know if you can read that. It's called a Z gauge, made by Beckett. And that slips right on there like that. And I'll try to get a nice close-up of this. And I'm going to set my nozzles on that little notch. See if I can get you in close. Set those on that notch like that. That's the proper setting. And then I'm going to tighten this. And all that does is it snugs down this bracket to hold these in place. This is porcelain, and all it is an insulator, and this metal conductor goes through the porcelain. On both sides we'll have 10,000 volts of electricity, and there will be an arc right here, and that's what ignites the fuel. So when our fuel ignites, we get a nice flame coming out of here, especially when I have brand new nozzle and filters and all that kind of stuff. So yeah. And then again, you just kind of tighten it till you get some good resistance, and just check, make sure things aren't going to move on you. And so that would go back in here. I can put that back in here. I'm not going to do it. If you were in lab, the guys in lab already did this stuff. So, and one thing to note is this transformer takes 120 volts and steps it up to 10,000 volts. And so you always want to try to take a screwdriver or something just to see if you could discharge any kind of electricity that might be stored up there. And then we're going to have a lesson a little bit later on the CAD cell. That's this part. And what that does is it sees the yellow flame. And when it sees light, the resistance changes, and it tells this that everything's okay to keep running. So what I'm going to do now, I've done my preventive maintenance items. I'm going to open this back up and see how this is loose right here. This is a bleeder. You don't want to take that all the way out. You just want it loose. It's just loose. When I open this up, oil is going to flow through this pipe, and we're going to fill this line back up. We're going to fill everything back up. And this is venting any air that's in the system. It's venting it out. It takes a while. It's going to take a minute or two to vent all the air out of there. But this little set screw right here, I loosen it, but don't take it all the way out. And then when this starts seeping oil out of it, that way I know that this cartridge is full. I have oil available, and we should be able to run our furnace. So this has been vented. If you can see, there's oil coming out of this little screw hole. I'm going to tighten that down. Oops, I'm going to use my 5/16 wrench. I'm just going to snug that down. And again, it's just kind of like go till it stops, and then just give it a little snug. And what you're doing is you're pressing this against that gasket sandwiched in there, and that's creating a nice tight seal so it won't leak. You change the gasket here, here, and here, all three, and then that won't leak. If you don't change the gasket, it'll save you a couple minutes of time, but it'll cost you time too, because then you're gonna have to come back and fix those leaks. So this is a one-pipe system. A one-pipe oil system means there's one pipe going to the pump. They also make a two-pipe system. But a one-pipe system needs to be bled because there's air in here. Because we had the system open, we bled as much air as we could, But this part of the pipe, there's still going to be a little bit of air in here, and pumps don't like to pump air. They like to pump liquid. So what we're going to do is bleed this. And this is like a brake bleeder on a car. I put a little hose on here. I'm going to open this, just crack it. Somebody had that really good. Turn this on. Okay, so we're going to bleed this now. So I got this loosened. Kicked in over here. And that's driving this pump. You can see a few droplets coming out here. Oil. Now I have a nice solid flow of oil. I'll tighten this up. And now so when I had this open, all the oil was coming out this way. When I close it, it forces it up through this little brass pipe, copper pipe, and into my oil nozzle. So now this is bled. Take this little hose off. I can take my oil and dispose of it properly. Open this up. What an oil fire looks like. So one other thing, it's hard to show on the video, but this motor is driving the pump, and there's a plastic coupler in there. And that coupler needs to be replaced also every year. So there's 4 things: a nozzle, the coupler, the fuel filter, and the strainer. Those are the 4 things. 4 things.